Despite facing protests over his immigration crackdown, U.S. President Donald Trump is back in campaign mode, addressing his first election rally of 2026 in Iowa. He warned of very bad things if Republicans lose the U.S. midterm polls. All 435 seats in the House of Representatives, as well as 35 Senate seats, are up for grabs. In the midterms scheduled for November this year, Trump cautioned that Democrats will roll back many tax cuts if they seize control of the House.
If we lose the midterms, you'll lose so many of the things that we're talking about, so many of the assets that we're talking about, so many of the tax cuts that we're talking about, and it would lead to very bad things. We got to win the midterms. I mean, I'm here because I love Iowa, but I'm here because we're starting the campaign to win the midterms. We got to win the midterms.
While refraining from directly touching upon ICE protests, President Trump claimed that the U.S. border is totally closed. He also boasted about his achievements on the economic front, stressing that inflation has been defeated. The event was not controversy-free, as protesters disrupted his speech on multiple occasions. The U.S. president hit back, calling them paid insurrectionists. One protester was finally removed from the venue.
Hello and welcome, guys. Dr. John is here. So what is happening right now is something crazy. So let's move forward. Trump admitted out loud, on tape, in front of reporters, that he's terrified of being impeached again. The man who spent years calling every investigation a witch hunt and a hoax just told the American public that if Democrats take Congress, he fully expects to be impeached. Not a leak, not spin.
You do know they're paid agitators, right? They're paid. They get paid. Do you ever see their signs? We used to have protests and you'd have guys making a sign in a basement. These are all paid agitators. That's all they are. They get paid to go and they don't even know when they interview them, why are you here? I don't know. They have no idea. They're paid insurrectionists, really, in some cases. They're sickos.
Incidentally, this is not the first time the president has expressed concern about the upcoming U.S. elections, citing historical trends that have seen the party in power lose seats in the second year of a presidency. Earlier this year, the U.S. president told House Republicans at their annual retreat that he will get impeached if he doesn't win the midterms. Subsequently, he told Reuters about his desire to cancel the polls altogether. While the White House later clarified that Trump was joking, this has raised concern about his future plans. For instance, during his Iowa speech, he again hinted at the possibility of running for a third term, which is barred under the U.S. Constitution.
His own voice on record confirming he knows exactly what's coming and can't stop himself from saying it. Let me play you the exact words that came out of his mouth because they are too revealing to paraphrase. With his voice carrying that particular tone of grievance mixed with genuine dread, he told his audience they had to win the midterms because if Republicans lose, the opposition will simply locate a reason to impeach him. They will find a reason, he repeated. Find a reason, not manufacture a reason, not fabricate something out of thin air.
You got to win the midterms, because if we don't win the midterms, it's just going to be, they'll find a reason to impeach me. I'll get impeached. We don't impeach them. You know why? Because they're meaner than we are. We should have impeached Joe Biden for 100 different things. They are mean and smart. They impeached me. I never knew I was going to be impeached. I get a phone call, you just got impeached. I said, what does that mean? It took them 10 minutes. They impeached me for nothing, twice.
Not invent a scandal where none exists. Find. That single word is the confession. That tiny linguistic choice is the entire story wrapped in 4 letters. When you say someone will find a reason, you are acknowledging the reason already exists. You are conceding the underlying facts are real and merely waiting to be uncovered. He did not accuse Democrats of planning to lie. He did not warn they would concoct evidence. He said they would look.
It's an amazing phenomenon. You win the presidency. And we sure as hell are having a successful presidency, I will say that. But even if it's a successful presidency, there's been nothing like what we're doing. But even if it's successful, they don't win. I don't know what it is. There's something psychological, like you vote against. You can win by a lot. We won every swing state. We won the popular vote by millions. We won everything.
But they say that when you win the presidency, you lose the midterm. So you're all brilliant people. Most of you are in this business longer than me. But I wish you could explain to me what the hell's going on with the mind of the public.
And they would discover. And in that involuntary moment of honesty, he told the world what keeps him awake at night. The evidence is there. The conduct is documented, and if the gavel changes hands, the search party gets sworn in. While Trump was delivering this accidental confession at his press conference across town, the Speaker of the House was running the exact same playbook with slightly better tailoring. MAGA Mike Johnson has been sprinting from camera to camera, sitting for every interview that will have him, warning Republican voters with an urgency that borders on hysteria. His message is a mirror of Trump's panic. He tells anyone who will listen that if Democrats capture the House, the radical left will immediately launch impeachment proceedings against President Trump and create absolute chaos. Listen to the word absolute. Not mild disruption, not political friction, absolute chaos. This is the Speaker of the House of Representatives, the constitutional officer tasked with maintaining order and stability, predicting apocalyptic disorder the moment his party loses the majority. And he delivers this prophecy as though it represents some grave injustice rather than the constitutionally prescribed mechanism for addressing presidential misconduct. Mike, I have to ask, what exactly do you believe we are living through right now, if not chaos? The tariff roller coaster that sent markets into free fall for weeks. Was that orderly governance? The deportation flights that openly defied federal court orders. Was that stability? The administration losing case after case in court on multiple fronts simultaneously. Was that calm? The truth is, the chaos did not start when Democrats started talking about impeachment. The chaos has been emanating from one end of Pennsylvania Avenue for quite some time, and everyone watching can identify the source. But Johnson was not finished performing confidence. He took his act to the friendly confines of state media and gave them a full assessment of the Republican midterm prospects. When asked to rate their chances, he looked directly into the lens and proclaimed 10 out of 10, a perfect score. With a House majority so razor-thin that a handful of special election defeats could shatter it entirely, this man declared absolute certainty of victory and expansion. He said it with the manic energy of someone who desperately needs to believe what they are saying, repeating it aloud like an incantation, hoping sheer repetition might manifest it into reality. Then he let the mask slip completely. He said Republicans have to give President Trump 4 years and not 2. Buried inside that sentence is the entire unvarnished truth of his panic. What he is really communicating is that if Republicans lose the House, the Trump presidency ceases to function as a governing operation. The moment those committee gavels change hands, the investigative machinery that Republicans have been sitting on for a year activates instantly. Subpoenas fly, documents get demanded, witnesses get summoned, and the full apparatus of congressional oversight turns its gaze toward an administration that has been operating largely without scrutiny. Johnson knows this. Trump knows this. It is why the entire redistricting war erupted in the first place. This is where the narrative takes a turn into genuine farce. Trump personally ignited this redistricting battle. He was the one who went to Texas mid-decade and demanded they redraw the lines to manufacture Republican House seats that would never exist under a fairly drawn map. And yet even his own allies on friendly networks could not defend the scheme without accidentally confessing its true purpose. One host, attempting to justify the gerrymander, actually called it an insurance policy by the president to avoid what happened during his first term, which he described as needless investigations leading to impeachment efforts. An insurance policy against impeachment, said out loud on national television by someone paid to make Trump look good. Not representation, not fair districting, not the will of the voters, an insurance policy to shield Trump from accountability for his own conduct. The same host then performed a remarkable act of rhetorical contortion. He announced that he genuinely hates gerrymandering, that districts should be compact and contiguous, that they should not resemble a snake's house slithering across the map, but then pivoted to blame Democrats for starting the war, claiming Republicans merely had to match them. The problem with this narrative is its factual bankruptcy. Trump started it. That is simply what happened. He went to Texas mid-decade and instructed them to carve out 5 new Republican seats. Democrats did not fire the first shot. Trump loaded the cannon, aimed it, and pulled the trigger. And now every Democratic governor with a pen is fully engaged. The entire situation spiraled because Trump believed himself to be clever, and instead he handed the opposition both the playbook and the motivation to deploy it everywhere simultaneously. Then Virginia voted. Virginia passed their redistricting amendment. Democrats secured the map advantage in a state that matters enormously, and suddenly, the very insurance policy Trump constructed in Texas is hemorrhaging from a wound nobody saw coming. The political heavyweights immediately recognized the significance. High-profile Democratic governors amplified the victory. Former President Obama weighed in publicly. Congressional leadership declared it both a triumph and a warning shot aimed directly at Florida Republicans. And Trump spent the night posting furiously about Obama, about sedition, about expunging his previous impeachment, because that is the behavioral signature of a man who is cornered with no real answer. When fear takes hold, the volume increases, the attacks grow harsher, and the midnight posting accelerates. This brings us to Senator Markey, who just articulated what many in his caucus have been thinking, but few have been willing to say with such unvarnished directness. He laid out the stakes in language that leaves zero room for misinterpretation. He described a situation of catastrophic gravity, referencing mass casualties among students, warning of a planned genocide, the destruction of a civilization. These are not the words of someone discussing a policy disagreement or a routine political squabble. This is a United States senator describing conduct that, in his assessment, has crossed the threshold where the Constitution's emergency mechanisms must be activated. And then he said it plainly. Impeach, file the articles, invoke the 25th Amendment. Before anyone dismisses this as performative rhetoric, pay attention to what he is actually describing before he reaches that conclusion. The stakes he articulates are existential. He is not talking about a trade dispute or a diplomatic spat. He is discussing actions that he believes constitute an imminent threat, requiring the activation of every constitutional safeguard available. And the 25th Amendment dimension of his statement is a fundamentally different conversation than simple impeachment. Impeachment is a political process. Articles get filed, the House votes, the Senate holds a trial. The 25th Amendment addresses something far more primal. It asks whether the person occupying the Oval Office possesses the mental and psychological capacity to discharge the duties of the presidency, whether the individual making life and death decisions affecting hundreds of millions of people is fit to continue doing so. The fact that a sitting senator is putting both mechanisms on the table in the same breath signals a shift in democratic thinking that is tectonic in its implications. Consider what is actually driving this accelerating energy, because it is not one isolated scandal. It is the cumulative weight of everything crashing down simultaneously. The tariff policy is not producing the promised results. The economic indicators are flashing warning signs that voters feel in their daily lives. The courts have been ruling against this administration on multiple significant fronts, blocking initiatives, striking down executive actions, and generally serving as the constitutional speed bump the founders intended. The deportation operations have smashed into legal barriers that the administration attempted to bulldoze through, only to face judicial consequences. And beneath all of this runs a pattern of conduct that members of Congress are watching with growing alarm, asking themselves at what point the normal framework of political disagreement becomes inadequate and the constitutional emergency tools become necessary. George Conway, now running for Congress, framed the question in terms that cut through the strategic hand-wringing that often paralyzes Democratic leadership. He said, "Impeachment is not an option for Democrats if they take the House. It is an obligation. Not a strategic choice to be weighed against polling in swing districts, not a political calculation to be massaged for electoral advantage, but a constitutional requirement imposed by the oath of office every member of Congress swears. If a president is violating the Constitution not occasionally, not accidentally, but as a sustained pattern of behavior, then the response is not optional. It is mandatory regardless of whether the political calendar feels accommodating." That framing dismantles the familiar Democratic anxiety about appearing too aggressive or frightening moderate voters. When senators are using the words Markey used, the cautious incrementalism of previous cycles becomes untenable. The midterm mathematics stacked on top of all this are brutal for Republicans once you genuinely examine them. The president's party historically loses seats in midterm elections. This is not a partisan talking point. It is a documented historical pattern stretching across decades of American political life. Every modern president has faced this structural headwind. The party holding the White House enters the midterm with a gravitational disadvantage that no amount of cable news spin can reverse. Trump is not operating in some magical alternate reality where historical forces suspend themselves for his benefit. He is a second-term president steering into a midterm cycle while the country experiences some of the most sustained economic anxiety in recent memory. Tariffs are not abstract concepts to families trying to afford groceries. When prices climb at the supermarket and the gas pump and on every imported item that populates the shelves of American retail, that is not a debate point for television panels. That is a kitchen table reality that follows voters into the polling booth. People who feel economic pressure in their actual lives vote based on what their lived experience tells them, not based on what the president posts on social media in the early morning hours. The manufacturing renaissance that was promised has failed to materialize on the scale advertised. The bring back jobs rhetoric of the campaign trail has collided with the complex reality of global supply chains that cannot be restructured overnight by executive order. Every week that passes without the promised economic transformation is another week where the Republican midterm argument becomes more difficult to sustain. Trump launched the gerrymander war because he internalized all of this before anyone else. He saw the midterm headwinds forming on the horizon and attempted to construct a structural seawall. New Republican seats in Texas, artificially manufactured majorities, maps drawn with surgical precision to make a Democratic wave mathematically impossible even if voter turnout surged. The plan possessed a certain brutal strategic logic. Then Democrats decided to fight fire with fire. Multiple states entered the arena, copying the tactic and turning it against its architect. Virginia delivered the most devastating blow by passing their amendment, and suddenly the firewall is riddled with gaps that cannot be sealed before the election. The irony is so thick it could choke you. Trump attempted to insulate himself from accountability by manipulating the maps. The act of manipulating the maps energized Democrats to fight back on redistricting in every state where they held power. The accountability he sought to escape is now more likely than it would have been if he had simply done nothing. He actively worsened his own situation through the very maneuver designed to save him. This is the recurring pattern of his entire political career, a short-term fix that creates a long-term catastrophe. An attempted end run around consequences that accelerates the arrival of those consequences. He cannot help himself. The impulse to cheat the system overrides the strategic judgment that would tell him the cheating makes everything worse. Even on the network built specifically to protect him, the mask slipped. The host trying to defend the Texas gerrymander could not stop his honest reaction from escaping before the spin engaged. He admitted he hates the practice. He admitted this is bad for the country, creating a landscape of exclusively red and blue states with no competitive territory. He said this while defending a Trump strategy, but the truth leaked out first, because even people ideologically committed to carrying water for this administration can see what is actually unfolding. Sometimes the honest reaction escapes before the propaganda reflexes kick in. Now the spiral is accelerating. Trump posts about Obama in the late hours, posts about expunging a previous impeachment that cannot be expunged, posts about sedition prosecutions that are not materializing, posts in a frenzy while Virginia tallies its votes, and Democrats celebrate a structural victory. This is his tell. When something is genuinely penetrating his defenses, the posting becomes more frantic, the targets become more specific, and the timing becomes more desperate. He goes after Obama because Obama becoming visible in this fight represents something that transcends normal politics. It signals the organizing is authentic, that figures with genuine reach and credibility are taking the threat seriously and mobilizing accordingly. That terrifies him in a way policy debates and editorial boards never could. Here is what observers of Trump's psychology have long understood. He does not fear substantive policy arguments. He does not fear fact-checkers or late-night comedians or sternly worded newspaper editorials. What genuinely frightens him is organized power, coordinated collective action, an opposition that has absorbed the lessons of previous defeats and is returning with sharper tactics and stronger resolve. Virginia represented exactly that. It was Democrats declaring they refuse to accept structural disadvantages any longer, refusing to play by outdated rules while Republicans redraw the chessboard to make their votes irrelevant. They are in this fight completely now, matching every maneuver with equal force. The impeachment conversation has migrated from the periphery to the center with remarkable speed. It is no longer emanating exclusively from the most progressive corners of the Democratic caucus. Senators are articulating it. Congressional candidates are running on it. Leadership figures who a year ago might have couched their language in careful qualifiers are now speaking with a directness that reflects a fundamentally altered political landscape. The hesitation that defined the early discussions about accountability during previous cycles has evaporated. Markey did not offer tentative suggestions about exploring options or considering possibilities. He issued an unambiguous directive: impeach, file the articles, invoke the constitutional mechanism that removes a president. Do it now. Trump knows this is coming. That is why the press conference admission happened. That is why the carefully chosen word find escaped his lips when fabricate would have served his narrative better. That is why Johnson is performing confidence while his voice carries the unmistakable tremor of dread. That is why the friendly media ecosystem is running saturation coverage about what happens if Democrats capture the chamber. Everyone inside that information bubble understands precisely what awaits. None of them can prevent it by posting through it or talking through it or redrawing maps in Texas. The maps in Virginia just transformed, and not in their favor. 3 times, if the arithmetic holds. The man who turned witch hunt into a political mantra, who screamed hoax with more sustained intensity than any figure in American history, who typed total exoneration in all capital letters and pinned it to his digital identity, is staring down the barrel of a 3rd impeachment because he attempted to gerrymander his escape from accountability and accidentally armed Democrats with a war they are now winning state by state. You could not fabricate a more poetic sequence of events. The self-destructive genius of it is almost artistically complete. Every panicked social media post, every midnight digital spiral, every press conference where the fear seeps through the cracks in the bravado, he is narrating his own conclusion in real time. They will find a reason to impeach me. Yes, they will. You placed the reasons directly in public view, documented them with your own voice, and broadcast them on platforms visible to the entire world. Virginia transformed the electoral map. Markey articulated what the political class has been thinking in private. Trump retreated to his residence and posted about it for hours because that is the behavior of a man who understands the walls are closing and has exhausted every escape route. The 3rd impeachment is no longer a hypothetical lurking in a distant possible future. It is a probability sharpening into focus with each passing day, and the panic you just witnessed on that press conference stage confirms he can see it coming as clearly as everyone else.